Um, so Southwest Stirling Climate Action Network, we've been going since about January, and the end of January, early February this year was when we got our official status from OSCAR, which is the Scottish Charity Regulator, as a SCIO, Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organisation. We weren't sure when we were trying to set up what structure we should go for or what we should do, and we got some very helpful advice from Stirling Volunteer Enterprise, which runs as a third sector engagement in this neck of the woods, and they were really helpful at explaining the benefits of going for a proper constitution and setup, and talking us through what that process was. And I think it will pay dividends for us going forward, both in terms of attracting funders, in terms of our engagement with some other partners, and as we'll go through, we'll see it also allowed us to actually have an official status. We're in Southwest Stirling. People don't know the geography. That patch of water that you can see in the sort of further background is Loch Lomond, one of the largest Scottish lochs. The little villages that are in between us and the loch are some of our catchment villages. So we live in a lovely part of the country, which is good in the sense of persuading people to try and join in and understand what we want to do and why we want to preserve it. I'll just try and quickly go through my understanding of what the differences are between Scotland and England. And I've just realised that in we're both got Westminster as our ultimate government, but in Holyrood we have a Scottish Parliament which has devolved powers until the Westminster Parliament says it doesn't. So, for instance, we thought we were going to have a recycling scheme for bottles, and then suddenly we weren't because it was legally challenged. So, as well as tripping themselves up, we also get tripped up occasionally from Westminster. Down below that, though, we have a much simpler structure, possibly because we've got this extra parliament of regional councils dropping down to community councils. So our regional councils are probably similar to the unitary authorities that there are in England. They're responsible for everything across the board, except fire and police services, which are national, so they report directly into Holyrood. We don't have regional fire areas or regional police. We used to, but as we've gone through evolution, they now just report in. So our unitary authorities do social work, education, road repairs, litter collection, all those things. Um, and therefore we don't have the county council, district, borough council, city councils that all of you work within and work with. We have community councils that are probably the nearest equivalent to the parish councils, but I think, as far as I can understand, parish councils have a more specific role. You have some financial scope. You can asset manage and own local halls. You have a level of capital spend because of that. You can run an operation of fines for littering and so on. I think certainly all those things seem to be things that parish councils can do. In Scotland, community councils can't do any of that. We get a grant to help us actually with our secretariat to running meetings, but that's it. We don't have any other sort of funding. But otherwise, very similar. They're staffed by community councillors who, like parish councillors, are volunteers with a commitment to the community of trying to get it right. I'll try and quickly go through then the difference in planning structures, because I think it's just relevant to what we've tried to do as an organisation in SWScan. So in England, you've got the National Planning Policy Framework is the overriding thing that Westminster's done, but it's regulatory in the sense that it guides what other people do for planning. It doesn't actually say what you do for planning, compared with in Scotland, we have National Planning Framework 4, which actually sets out specifics of things that have to happen in terms of planning. So it's slightly more detailed and slightly more regulatory and statutory. Um, I'm not sure, but I think, and do correct me if I'm wrong on this one, the local planning decisions or the local plans that inform local decisions would be made by all those areas. So unitary authorities, county councils, city councils, district councils, all may produce local plans saying what's happening in their patch, and what buildings are approved and not approved, and how land is to be used. In Scotland, in the regional councils, it's just a local development plan. We have 32 local authorities. Each one of them produces a local development plan that says what's going to happen in their area, referencing it back to NPF4 to say, here's what should happen. And then dropping down from that, parish councils, my understanding is, produce neighbourhood plans, and that sets the tone for what you want to happen on your particular patch in terms of asset management, in terms of future planning. And our community councils have local place plans, and that's a comparatively recent thing. The Scottish Parliament's been working towards greater community empowerment. So for the first time, we're in a cycle where villages have been encouraged to produce a local place plan that by statute, the regional council will have to consider. They don't have to adopt it, they can consider it and reject it outright, but they do have to consider it, and it will hopefully give slightly more teeth to community councils in saying what happens and what they want to do. Where all that fitted together is in Stirling, which is our county, and again, recommend it to visitors. It's a lovely part of the world. Stirling produces its local development plan, and we, in the bottom, as the name implies in the tin, we're the southwest. So we're Kippen, Maclivey, Balfron, Killearn, Drimmen, those areas in the southwest are the Climate Action Network. We have, and it's a sort of chip on my shoulder all the time, we have what I term a Pareto Council. So if you look at that particular map, the blue line or aqua line in the bottom right is the M9, the motorway that goes up to past Stirling and then becomes the A9 and goes on further up. And in those villages, Dunblane, Bridge of Allen, Stirling and Bannockburn, the right-hand side, the space to the right of that blue line, has 80% of the population of the county of Stirling. The left-hand side, which is all the rest of the land, has 80% of the land. So we have this unbelievable thing that Stirling should, first of all, should never have been allowed to call itself Stirling. It should have been Stirling and Trossachs, as got Perth and Cumross or Dumfries and Galloway. But it's called Stirling. It's got 80% of the population in a built-up conurbation area, and it keeps thinking it's a city council. And in fact, we have this vast area of land over to the left, and we have to try and keep reminding them that no, you're a rural council as well as a city council, and you need to actually listen to rural voices and address rural issues. So there are challenges for us. What that meant was that there was a level of impetus and effort that we could put behind setting up the South West Stirling Climate Action Network. So basically, one of the things that I've always enjoyed and taking comfort from is the banter sessions are a great way of restoring your morale or restoring your emotional batteries. You come on and think, well, actually, I'm not the only Burke who believes all these things are important. There are other people out there who are doing it too. And we get that sort of, okay, I'm not alone in this. It's an uphill battle. People don't seem to be listening, but other people across the country are listening, and that's important. And we found that within our village networks, that in each village, we had 2 or 3 people who believed that this was important, who believed something had to happen, something had to change, and we're able to get mutual support by working together. We'd met 2 or 3 times as the Scottish Government is putting in a thing called Climate Action Hubs. So we have 32 local authorities. We have, I think it's at the last count, about 18 climate action hubs. So it's not as many as local authorities. And they're designed to give seed funding to local community action groups. They're designed to hold the council to account. They're designed to try and drive things forward. While they were setting those up, there was a level of engagement that happened across local communities, and it was through that we all kind of found each other as the voices in each village were interested in doing this. While we met at their engagement sessions, we decided that we'd keep in touch and try and build up and create something. And by the end of last year, I realized that we had to step up and become an organization. Otherwise, we'd just be a group of pals getting together, chatting, saying, do you know, someone should be doing something about that. We recognized that maybe it was us who needed to do something about it. So we set up South West Stirling Climate Action Network. We try and support similar actions across our communities, sharing ideas, learning what works, promoting cross-promotion across the villages, collaborating on actions. Things like active travel paths have traditionally happened at sort of community council level or community development trust level. The problem with that is a really good active travel path links communities. So you relied on communities talking to other communities to work together. And when you look at something like a retrofit program or a food localization program, they're quite often much more effective, cost effective and efficient if you can make them at a multi-village or regional level rather than just one space. And then lastly, to try and be an advocate for our communities to pressurize local authorities on climate sustainability issues. And that last one was where we suddenly realized that we kind of want to watch by setting ourselves up as a SCIO, Scottish Charitable Incorporated Organisation. We had it meant that we could then satisfy the requirements of the Section 19 of the Community Empowerment Act Scotland of being a properly constituted community body who could submit its own local place plan. So while we have, and hopefully that map will come through reasonably clearly, while each of the villages in blue, Kippen, Maclivey, Drimmen, Balfron, Killearn and Swift Lane, all did their own local place plan, their community councils agreed to become members of SWScan, as did the development trusts in each of 3 or 4 of the villages that had them. And therefore that gave us a constituency to go back to the Stirling Council and say, we're a community organisation, we represent these areas, we want to submit our own local place plan. It has yet to be validated, but we're very, very hopeful that we've met all the requirements, we've ticked all the boxes. Certainly the discussions we've had so far, it should mean that we get our local place plan in. It's been good in its own right. So we've got a range of climate action or climate considerations, and we'll come on to the next slide, that we've managed to put in front of Stirling Council now and say, here's what we want you to work with. It's a slightly twisted list in the sense that a local place plan is meant to be about what the council should do in relation to assets and land. So we had to kind of tweak it and say this is why it's all assets and land, gov honest. But it, you know, as climate things do tend to cover slightly broader than that. What's also been really, really helpful, because we've lobbied and engaged with the community councils, each of them has mentioned SWScan in their place plan, saying that they look forward to working in collaboration with Stirling Council and SWScan on climate matters. So not only have we got our own place plan that we've driven forward, but we've helped ensure that climate change is on the place plans of all the other community councils that we're members with. The legislative requirements say that you have to have a notice, an information notice and copy of the plan for a 28-day consultation period to every adjacent community council. So we have this slightly surreal thing. I mean, normally that just means 3 or 4 board councils, because we have so many councils, the ones in blue in our area, all the councils in red had to receive notification notices saying, here's what we're doing, here's who we are, here's why we're doing it. And what has happened is, in 2 or 3 cases, they've got back in touch with us saying, well, we're not in your catchment, but can we keep in touch and compare notes? Or actually, we are in your in your potential catchment. Can we join in? So it's been a really positive thing in terms of making those links and getting people on board. What we've got are basically 5 proposals. I'll go through each one of them. In energy, localized energy development, we want the council to be clear on what the planning procedures are if people want to use wind turbines or solar. I mean, one of the few real strengths I think rural communities should have is the ability to start looking at self-sufficiency in energy. So, and you know, we have a lot of wind stations up here already. There's 1 or 2 solar. And I know solar seems surprising for Scotland, but if you angle them right, you can get some very good results. So we want to see a world where we're producing energy locally and also getting the legislative changes that allow us to sell it locally. At the moment, there's this surreal thing that we have to, if you produce energy, you have to sell it to Scottish Power or Scottish Southern Electricity, who then sell it back to your community. We've got to get past that so we can sell locally. Certainly, I believe that if we are serious in our commitment to electric vehicles and air source heat pumps, the grid will not sustain the level of demand that that's going to create. So having local energy clubs with local renewables doing the production and local people consuming that energy has to be a way forward, but it will require some legislative changes. But we also want to make sure the council's not going to put planning impediments in place. The other concern we had about the council's approach was around conservation. So most of our villages have conservation areas. Some of them have listed buildings outside those areas. At the moment, the Stirling Council's planning guidance on listed buildings and conservation areas says, had you thought about thicker curtains? And that's it. You know, they've gone for the very easy opt-out thing, that not wanting to upset historic Scotland, of saying, yes, you don't want to do anything structural to your building. Maybe a couple of blinds, thicker curtains, and the odd draft excluder in your home dry. And those are all good suggestions, but they shouldn't be the only suggestions. It's particularly problematic. We're very, very fortunate. most of our villages, while there are pockets of poverty and people facing fuel poverty, food poverty, generally most of the people living in these villages are the upper end of prosperity. They're in owned homes. We need to persuade them that they should be doing things through their home that aren't necessarily instantly in their financial interest, but have a better long-term future for the planet. Ideally, we want them to be in their financial interest too. So one of the things you need to do is ensure there are very few barriers to them doing something. So at the moment, if you were wavering about whether or not you should be putting in extra insulation or putting on solar panels or putting on whatever else to improve the retrofitting your house, you'd go onto the council website and see that planning was actually making life very difficult for you and there's very little you should be doing. And you'd use that as an excuse to say, well, fine, I'll just carry on paying high fuel bills, not worth the hassle. So we've got to get past that and actually make sure that planning guidance encourages homeowners to put their hands in their pockets and actually come up with things that will improve the health, their own health, hopefully will produce some financial benefits for them and be better for the planet. Terms of resilience, and again, we've just faced some major issues I know in different parts of the country around storms and snow this time rather than flooding. But we had Owen, we had Amy a few weeks ago. Up here, it's not in any sense unusual for the power to go and for you to have 2 or 3 days without power, and that's been for a long time. The things that have changed, one, storms that were once in a generation became once in a decade, and storms that were once in a decade became once a year, and storms that once a year become every season. So we know that there's going to be increased frequency of storms. The other thing that has been an unintended consequence, the switch by BT and other telecoms providers to internet telephony means that once your power goes, that's it, you're gubbed. And so we suddenly found lots of our villages had no means of communicating with the outside world. Uh, we needed to set up. It was really as far as I'm aware, we didn't have any real serious casualties. But communities that had been so good at having their telephone trees and their systems for COVID and helping people and sorting things out and so on, and were incredibly resilient, suddenly were just kneecapped because they had no idea what to do. You weren't able to get in touch with people. You weren't able to publicize notices. We didn't have neighborhood watch volunteers walking up and down the street saying who's got a red card in the window saying they needed help. We didn't have satellite phones or airways, the emergency radio system police use, in each community village hall saying, here's how you can get in touch if you need someone. So we want to work on that. It's something, again, it's something that I'm hopeful will help drive a more positive response to climate change action, because even if you can't actually buy into active travel or can't buy into energy retrofit, you can buy into the fact that we need to be able to call an ambulance if someone is going into labor or has a heart attack or whatever else. So I think there's a general community support for saying, yes, let's sort that out. Active travel, again, all of you will have those in your own area. We have this slightly surreal thing. We have our high school with 8 satellite village schools that feed into it, but there's no active travel links between any of those 8 schools and the high school. The high school recently, through the support of another charity, have been running a cycling club. They've trained students on bike repairs, so they do bike repairs for students and for teachers. It's a really good process, but it only covers the kids who actually live in Balfron. If you live further afield, you're not going to be able to cycle to school because it's just not safe. So we need to create that active travel link and help people understand that. Um, Orchards are just a sweet spot for me. I always think of orchards as being a sort of gateway drug into sustainability, because if you've got a good community orchard, you're looking at food sustainability, food sovereignty, you're looking at biodiversity, and you're looking at just engaging with your community. We had a program, the Fourth Valley Orchard program, that ran 2006 2010, and there were grants for planting trees, so lots of fruit trees were planted. And then in about 2012, when funding stopped, it all fell off a cliff. Our experience, looking around our neighborhoods here, is that orchards work for the lifespan of the enthusiast slash grower who tends that orchard. And sadly, when they and you know the in general, sorry, in general, we're of a slightly older generation when we look around the table at these banter sessions. In orchard sessions, the same thing applied. And we had some excellent people who set up orchards, but they're no longer with us, and the orchards fall into neglect. So across the villages of the map I just showed you in blue, there are actually 8 community orchards, only one of which is being actively tended. Some of them are in primary schools, some of them are community spaces. We have a real challenge with the council at the moment in just trying to understand one orchard that's in a community space is that the council acknowledge it's council land, but they don't know or won't tell us whether it's owned by the housing account of the council or the general fund account of the council. And until we know that, we can't actually get the correct permissions to actually tend the fruit trees. So we've got people lined up wanting to tend the fruit trees, we just don't have permission to help them yet. In the village that's doing the orchard stuff, what we're seeing are really, really good things happening. They're getting the community out. Families are adopting fruit trees within the orchard, so they actually take a real interest in how's my tree doing, what's happening. There are a couple of community pruning days a year. There's a community apple pressing day, and all those things are really, really good community engagement things, as well as being fun events in their own right. We've been doing apple pressing, community apple pressings, just where people bring along their own fruit in the villages for the last 2 or 3 years. The first time we did them, we had a whole lot of stuff set up. That's how we keep the kids entertained while we were doing all the apple pressing and apple scratching and so on. And found all the kids wanted to do was turn the handle of the scratcher or turn the wheel in the press. It was, and they were enwrapped to see something going from apple to apple juice and to be able to taste fresh apple juice. So, it's a real eye opener for us, but it's certainly something that we're very, very keen to try and drive forward. And then the last proposal is around local nature conservation sites. So again, trying to do my homework in this, I think these are either SINCs in parts of England and Wales, sites of importance for nature conservation, or local nature reserves, LNRs. But there are sites that are not statutory, they're not like triple SIs, but they are additionally protected. We have a real challenge at the moment that the council lost its biodiversity officer in May 2023. The nature restoration officer, they changed the job profile slightly, who replaced him, didn't start until May 2025. So in 2 years where they just didn't have the officer in place and nothing happened on these. And because I'm just a narky person, I've done a couple of freedom of information requests to try and find out what, if anything, has happened. And they've had difficulty in answering those. So I've now sick to the Information Commission of Scotland on them over the fact that they took 49 days rather than 29 to respond, and the response was ineffective. But we have a real concern that the council, because it's taking these local place plans from each of the communities, and it's put a call out to landowners and developers for expressions of interest in future development, a call for sites, and there's nothing on the local nature conservation side. So it really offends me that we can try and do where do we want to build and not in the same breath say and where do we want to protect. So we're desperately trying to bring forward the the areas that we think should be looked after and are important. They had theoretically a long, long time ago, they had these provisional local nature conservation sites, but we did kind of spot check in one that was an upland birchwood, and it's now a Sitka spruce plantation. So basically, no one's been paying attention to it, and damage has set in. That's what we're doing. We've also doing other stuff about energy retrofit. We're doing stuff about strategic food and so on. Happy to sort of chat and take questions on anything. So basically, so lots to be done. Good bunch of people to work with. Work seems worthwhile. You meet nice, like-minded people along the way, either physically or online, like today. And that's what we're about. Our website, our email are there. That's me with one of my colleagues doing an apple pressing. The biggest risk at apple pressing, you'll see it's as one of those bar and windlass presses, is dads desperately trying to do each other to see if they can turn the press an extra quarter turn, which means that we end up with bent bars and wrecked presses. So we've had to sort of dissuade fathers from using it as a test your strength machine. Maybe we'll have to have one of those hammer things that ring the bell on the side for that fathers to demonstrate their prowess with. I'll stop sharing now, but happy to answer any questions or we just generally have a discussion.
Frank, thanks very, very much for that. It's as you said, it's very encouraging to hear that other people in other parts of the country are having the same sort of issues that we're all saying. So the ideas are able to be spread everywhere. I did have a couple of questions that came to mind, and the first was about your community orchards. Are
Hmm.
they self-sustaining financially? Do you sell the products?
No, so they're not really orchards, certainly as you would understand them in your neck of the woods, where you will have 60, 80 trees. These are a dozen trees or eight trees that have been planted either in a school grounds or in the community in our community land. So they're not really self-sustaining in the sense the fruits community fruits. So we encourage people to pick and enjoy. Um, we're I don't think they'll ever be self-sustaining because we'd rather see the people get the fruit for free than anything happen with it. And likewise, when we do the pressings, we give away the juice. So I think it's more a community engagement venture than a
I was just
celebration.
thinking in terms of conservation with weed killer or whatever you need to look after the trees, or a tree surgeon has to come and look at them. Somehow the money's got to be raised for that.
And we will. So we'll do some funding applications specifically. We have funding applications that we're preparing at the moment to look at training people within each village. So my vision is that you will have an expert in each village who actually has the knowledge to say, yes, this is how you prune trees. This is a concern. They'll know enough to know what they don't know, and then we'll have an expert that we can call in to give us help, potentially paid help at that level. But they'll know what the ordinary person will know what needs to do on a day-to-day basis and get volunteers to help and drive that forward. But particularly because we exist as SWScan and because you can link people up with things like WhatsApp groups, we can have a situation that if a village gets hit by a particular storm and that trees are damaged, or if the lead orchard person sadly dies or moves away, the neighboring villages can support until that orchard gets back in its feet again. So I think that's what I'm hoping is going to make the difference, is having that resilience built in because you've got that continuity.
And the other question I had was, this sort of shows up my ignorance of the way that you're governed up there. Do you have the same requirement as we have down south on the biodiversity net gain, that developers have got to come up with 10% improvement?
It's not it is similar. So MPPF has that is actually calls it net gain and sets out what it is. MPF4 doesn't detail it in quite the same way. It says that there should be no harmful impact on biodiversity. It says that there should be an evaluation of what the impact might be and steps taken to compensate for that. But it stops short of it making a sort of zero sum game of saying, or even a positive sum game of saying, if you're taking away that, you have to do this. I have a real concern. It's one of the reasons I'm trying to drive forward the LNCS program as much. I'm slightly concerned that the net gain issue has created an environment in which it's even more in a developer or landowner's interest to intentionally degrade the biodiversity of an area prior to submitting an application. Um, we have, and I know that might seem slightly far-fetched, but we have, and it's a very microsm example, just down the road in Killearn, there is a house that used to be called Two Oaks. And it was a big old house, and it had a big old couple of 100-year oaks in the garden. And the garden was big enough that they wanted to infill and build another house in the garden. So tree surgeons were called in. They took down the oak, a couple of beech trees, a lime, all taken down. Then they had the audacity to get someone in to do an environmental survey and tree survey, submitted the tree survey to the council with his planning application to do the infill build, together with a method work statement showing how to protect these trees and look after them. Now, technically, he was outside the conservation area of the village. There was no tree preservation order in place. No laws had been broken. Um, but given that you only had to go onto Google Maps and see the difference between the aerial shot when all the trees were there and the photos he was submitting as part of the application, the evidence was there. But as I say, no laws were broken. Nothing could be done. So we do need to put in place the greater enforcement. It's also been one of the challenges that we have, and I think it's probably similar down south. Everyone loves silver bullet solutions. So in the way I talked about condensing boilers, and then it was cavity wall insulation and loft insulation, and now we've got appalling problems with people scared that their houses be made unassailable. Air source heat pumps are not the only solution. So what do we do in those areas? So the same thing is up here, everything's planting trees. Trees are our answer. Let's plant more trees. But actually, there's lots of parts of Scotland, and in fairness, Scottish Forestry is beginning to learn this, where the peat bogs were capturing more carbon than the trees would in 80 to 100 years. So restoring peat bogs and preserving them means you've got more captured carbon. Um, there's a site just down the road from us in Strathblane that has 30 species of waxcap. Now, I'm not a fungi expert, but my understanding is it makes it one of the greatest waxcap sites in the UK. The mycelium layer underneath that ancient grassland, it has lots and lots of captured carbon. But at the moment, we're fighting I think we'll get there, but we're fighting a battle with the landowner who wanted to plow it up, put in drainage and plant trees because that would help our carbon capture, even though it would destroy existing carbon stores. I see this hands up, so I think well, Gary, you were perhaps first.
I think David.
Oh, David, well,
Yeah. How did you work with the community councils? Who did what?
So in some cases, I just went along as perhaps as becoming apparent. I'm very happy to talk about these things, and so I would go along and explain and say, look, here's what's important. In most cases, there were local initiatives that you could reference and say, you've already got a sustainability group that's doing great things, or you've got a wildlife sanctuary and that's really good. But here are some other things you could think about. In a couple of our villages, so one of we have 7 trustees. One of the trustees is also the chair of Driven Community Development Trust and on Driven Community Council. Another one of the trustees is on Buffalong Community Council. So the community councillors in some cases crossed over with ourselves. I think they're in most cases very, very happy if I've cornered the market on climate change expertise and feed that back to them. So if I know certainly in Killarn, my own village, I'll be going to community council meeting this evening. I'm not a community councillor, but I attend most sessions when I can. And if there's a climate thing crops up, it gets thrown in my direction as well. Frank will keep us right there. What do you think? What should we be doing? So I think if you've got I would suggest if you've got a community councillor who's already an expert or knowledgeable or competent in climate change, make them part of your network. And if there's no one in the community council in that role, offer them the sort of tame expert assistance and say, here's how we can help.
And so who does the research and who writes the documents that end up going to Stirling Council?
That would be me at the moment. I think, I mean, it is. So it was me. We got a grant from FEL, or the Climate Action Hub, which I used to employ someone who is an expert in place plans, because one of the things the place plan has to do is link back to the relevant parts of NPF4 and to the council's strategy and development plans. And I knew I didn't have that expertise, so it was worthwhile employing someone to do that, because he ensured that we were putting the right hooks in and we're more likely to be validated by the council. But in general terms, I wrote a lot of it. I'd help again within our village. We have a couple of zoology professors from University of Glasgow who are experts on different aspects of nature conservation. We've got our husband and wife, Jackie and Savory and Nigel Pope, who is Mara Media, do programs like Scotland in the Wild, and we have a moth recorder for Stirling Council area, all live in our village. So you can tap into those people and either say, can you give me 80 words on such and such, or can you read these words and see whether they do the right thing? On energy, I'm really lucky to have someone who's a trained conservation architect and retrofit assessor, who again will either draft stuff for me or keep me right in terms of what I'm drafting. So it's very much finding the expertise and breaking it down to bite-sized chunks so you're not trying to overwhelm them with what the ask is. I think it helps that I had no particular background or expertise in this area. So my work life was all change management, consultancy, those sorts of areas. But that meant hopefully I'm reasonably good at working with people, identifying the win-wins in situations and encouraging people to work around, and then finding the experts who have real expertise but don't necessarily have the change management skills to so hopefully there's a good marriage there.
Right, okay, thanks.
And
Gary?
Gary, please.
Hi, Frank. Hopefully my sound is coming through. I've got some new headphones, so I'm not sure if these actually work or not, but it's great that they do. So first of all, I actually spent 2 years living around Stirling and working in Stirling for Keep Scotland Beautiful when they were running their Climate Challenge Fund on behalf of the Scottish Government. Unfortunately, that's gone because that would have been a great source of potential funding for you. One of the other organisations I worked for in Scotland was a retrofit organisation, Changeworks out of Edinburgh. Have you looked at approaching these organisations?
We've had a couple of meetings with Changeworks, and they're good people. I'm slightly concerned, or the fit isn't quite there because we're all about localization. And Changeworks is all about we're Edinburgh based and we can serve as the whole country, and I'm not sure that's what we need most. It is interesting to see what's happening, and I suspect there's similar events being played out down south. We have Nesfit up in Aberdeenshire. We have local homes in south of Glasgow, and these are either community interest companies or co-ops that have been formed around retrofit that bring together homeowners, assessors, and contractors. And the idea is that you buy some shares in the community interest company that entitles you to a discount on your assessment. You use one of the approved contractors who are also members, and that gives you confidence in the quality of the work. So that and ideally, if we actually get momentum going on a community interest retrofit company, you use local contractors. We're always conscious that if you employ contractors that need special skills they're going to come across from Edinburgh or from Stirling or from Glasgow. And what we want to do is get contractors who are based in Blainfield or Balfron and ensure there's a pipeline of work for them. That means that they'll actually create local apprenticeships, because we've heard from politicians for years about green jobs, the green economy, but I certainly think if we can get retrofit right, it has the capacity to be a community wealth building activity. And I don't know whether our southwest catchment area is big enough for its own retrofit hub. What's been lovely to see, and I take no credit for this because good ideas just spring up simultaneously, but in northwest Stirling, there's now an organisation called McLaren Community Futures, which is based around McLaren High School and Callender and covers all of northwest Stirling, and the Carse of Stirling Partnership, which covers the sort of river plain and before you get to Stirling, as looking at climate change adaptation and mitigation. So we're going to have 3 organizations. If we think back to that map where there's all that area to the left of the motorway, there are now 3 organizations that will basically cover all of that map with a certain level of overlap and be able to speak with one voice on climate. And I think that's going to be hopefully a really powerful thing. So slightly more of a longer answer than you thought. Changeworks are good. I'm happy to work with them. I'm just not sure what they will add compared with what Home Energy Scotland is doing or Energy Savings Trust does, and I want to be as local as possible.
Yeah, they're just pretty good at kind of just being aware of what all the solutions are in terms of retrofitting, like you say, especially restricted properties and stuff. I mean, they talk about internal wall insulation, that kind of stuff. They're just like experts, you can call them. Thing that also, Frank, I just wanted to ask you another question. Was what are your plans for next year? What are you hoping to achieve in 2026?
So one of the key things we have to do, as I say, we haven't been going for a year yet. So let's get to our AGM, get that sorted out, understand what our funding needs are. I think that either optimistic or naive. Because we're a network, we're not actually going to try and do that much. We're going to try and enable and encourage and support community development trusts or community sustainability groups to do things and link them with each other. So our funding requirements should be comparatively light. It will be our insurance, our website costs, our those basic things. And I would hope we'll be able to do that from crowdfunding. So we'll get specific project funding to do individual pieces of work, such as looking at energy retrofit and how we roll out our across villages. But in terms of our data operational costs, I hope we can crowdfund them. We're looking at setting up our thematic groups. So I mentioned the experts in our village on biodiversity. There's similar experts in other villages. I want to get them together. We've got experts in renewables and, as I mentioned, in energy conservation, get them together. So have thematic groups that will set the strategy and direction for the kind of 5 main themes: foods, biodiversity, energy, resource management, and active travel. There are slower burn things. So resource management, it would be ideal to have repair cafes. We've flirted with them. We've tried them once or twice. They've not quite taken off. Some villages I know do them extremely successfully, so there should be a market for that. The other thing I'm really keen to do is, and we talked about the active travel of Balfron High School and the satellite schools. One of my other hats that I wear is the operations officer for a group called On the Verge that sow wildflower seeds. So we work with primary schools and secondary schools, go in, clear a patch, sow wildflower seeds, give them a bit of chat about the importance of pollinators, the importance of nature restoration. It gives agency to children about actually doing something about climate. It helps back to that thing of if you can grab them when they're young. One of the things that we've had challenges with, and again, we mentioned Keep Scotland Beautiful, I think it runs the Green Flag program for schools, and that's really good. But we're not leveraging that. So 2/3 of our primary schools have Green Flag status, and our high school has Green Flag status. I want to get to a point, hopefully by the end of this educational year, probably starting properly up in 26-27. The Eco Club at our high school I work with, so I go along from time to time. They help me do different stuff. One of the things I'm trying to get them to do is a local recycling thing for each village. So in our village, the pharmacist recycles blister packs for pills. In Balfron, the optician recycles spectacles. So we want a local guy for each village saying, here's what you can and can't recycle. But I also want to use the Eco Club when it's Zero Food Waste Week or No Plastics Week or some other campaign like that. I want to train the Eco Club in doing a presentation on that and give them the confidence and the facts at the fingertips, then send them back to the primary schools that they left 2 or 3 years before, because in those primary schools, secondary school pupils are gods. They're the ones who made it. They're really important, and have them take assemblies in those primary schools and tell the younger kids why it's important that we avoid food waste, why it's important that we move away from plastics. And because we've got the community councils, community development trusts on board as well, we will have a parallel campaign in village Facebook pages covering food waste or covering zero plastics. So you're actually getting the high schools, the junior schools, and the communities simultaneously. And I think if we get that to work, it will be something that will really unlock the potential that at the moment we're just not getting. At the moment, the challenge has always been that I could see kids go to high school, but then they lose the links of their local communities. And so it's finding a way to make that a closed loop thing so that they haven't lost that community, they're still part of it.
Pan.
Well, hopefully.
Does anybody else have a question for Frank, please?
David's asked about Crean Larrick. It is bizarre. There are, if you look, so Scotland went, so I had this thing about them being honest about Stirling not being a city council, it's being a regional council. Argyll and the Isles, Argyll and Bute, takes everything to the west of Loch Lomond, and it was like a judgment call which way Crean Larrick would went. Our villages in southwest Stirling are all G63 postcodes, so most people think we're in Glasgow, including some of our councillors, rather than in Stirling, which is an FK postcode. But in general, when Scottish Parliament was created, it had to break up the regional councils. There used to be Central, Strathclyde, Lothian and Borders. It had to break them up because they'd have been too powerful to deal with. So it broke them up into smaller things. You've got Glasgow City Council, Eastern Bartonshire, Western Bartonshire, Stirling, Falkirk, Clacks, and so on. It is an exercise in gerrymandering. I mean, it's very hard not to be cynical about politics. If you look at the map of the council areas for Glasgow in particular, you will see that deals were done that in Eastern Bartonshire, it got Bearsden and Mulgai, which are quite posh suburbs and would be reliably going to vote Conservative, so that Eastern Bartonshire could keep a Conservative administration. And areas like Drumchapel, which are not at all posh, were left in Glasgow, and they would vote Labour, and Glasgow would have a Labour administration. But the county boundaries literally zigzag up and down to take in or leave out communities based on socioeconomic profiling. Very bizarre. Stuart.
Yeah, thanks for a very interesting talk, and I must congratulate your enthusiasm and patience in keeping going. It is more of a question, really. How well does solar PV work up in Scotland?
My understanding is it does work well. So I think I hopefully have said I don't claim to have an expertise in any of these things. I just know the right people to ask. But my understanding is it is good. It's particularly fine if you're just using solar to try and pre-water heat, then that's great. But if you're wanting solar to actually power things, obviously if you can get the right angle for if your roof happens to face the right way, that's a big help. There are solar arrays in fields that are generating power and make a return in terms of power. So we do get enough sun. I mean, today is a beautifully sunny day. It's cold, but there's lots of sunshine, so you do your generation. I think my understanding, and I need to get to the detail on this so I can preach it more effectively, but both the effectiveness and the cost of solar arrays and of batteries have come, the quality has improved and the prices come down, so that they're now looking much more like a viable option for people who want to be entirely self-sufficient. What we do want, but I see it as a solution that will then work in parallel with local energy clubs, so that if you are generating more and your battery's full, you feed it into the local tariff, as it were. What I mean, there's a level of just naive optimism about this that we've got to try and understand. SSE is putting in place another major hydro station, pumping hydro station. So again, I don't know enough about these to be an effective advocate for them, but my understanding is at least 2 or 3 in Scotland, where there's Cruachan, the Hollow Mountain is the most famous one, where there's a big lake or a big pool of water at the top that you can, at the moment's notice, just flip the switch and it will start generating electricity as it powers down the mountain into the loch below. And then when there's surplus electricity, you pump the water back up again. And that's the solution for all the concerns that renewables are never there when you need them. What happens when it's not sunny? What happens when it's not windy? Well, if you've got gravity-fed pumping stations that then allow you to suddenly add to the grid at a moment's notice, that's the solution. And Scotland's blessed in that it's got lots of water and lots of hills. We have, like everywhere else, there's levels of NIMBYism. I do sympathise. There are people protesting vigorously about pylons and electricity cable lines that are going across different parts of Scotland and in Angus and Fife and Perthshire. People hate the idea of wind turbines, but they're usually the people who would have hated the idea of gas-fired power stations or coal-fired power stations or nuclear power stations. So I think you have to choose: do we live in a world where there is no electricity, or do we try and do it in the way that's the least detrimental?
Thank you. I did hear a worrying fact a few days ago. I was in a meeting with NESO, the National Energy Systems Operator, and they were saying only about 20% of the country's total energy is provided by electricity. So I think if we're trying to electrify everything, we're going to have to generate a hell of a lot more electricity.
Absolutely, but I think that's where that local, I think. So it depends how long Scotland carries on being part of the happy family of the UK, and so there's all sorts of challenges in there. For Scotland to be self-sufficient in renewables is kind of should be a no-brainer. I'm not sure if England has the space to put in enough things for renewables. I think there's things like tide power and wave power and so on that will have to play a role as well. But again, how many areas of coast you have that you'd be allowed to or get away with doing that. And so the mini nuclear setup, I'm not really sure I like that, but I'm not sure there's not much other answer to it. But we do need to accept that if we're going to have electric vehicles, if we're going to have air source heat pumps, we're going to have a lot more electricity.
Yeah. Okay,
But
thanks.
and also we have to decouple it from the gas price. So at the moment there is this bizarre thing that renewable generators are getting windfall profits because it's been their prices pegged, and people aren't seeing the return. So if you genuinely went green in your electricity provider and were able to buy cheaper electricity, people might be less vociferous about saying, well, it's all a con, there's no real benefit in renewable electricity.
Yes, agree with it.
Well, Frank, thank you very, very much. It's been tremendous, and I enjoyed it. And you obviously sparked some questions from people. Next week, we are talking or being talked to by Duxford, who are going to explain what their local nature plan is. So do please come along for that. And if you can spare 30 seconds, Catherine, I'd love to know whether this is of any interest to you. What are you doing with the town council in Weymouth?
Hi, yeah, so I'm relatively new in post. Weymouth Town Council created a role of sustainability officer, and that's to deliver environmental initiatives and projects relating to their climate and ecological emergency plan. And we have a climate and ecological emergency group that meets once a month to manage the tasks on the plan, and we're currently prioritizing those tasks. So I'm looking at quite a broad range of topic areas, from waste to transport to energy, and many of the things that we have ambitions to do relate not just to within like the town council's scope, but outside. So I'm currently kind of like casting the net quite wide and looking at what scope we have to get involved and make a difference, how we can input and shape things that relate to Weymouth and sustainability. So I've been recommended that this group is like an interesting forum to share all sorts of different information, and it would be good if I just sort of see what's going on and join in. It's been interesting.
Well, congratulations on your new job, and I hope it comes out very successfully.
Thanks. Yeah,
Well
maybe
done.
I'll do a presentation for you sometime.
Yes, that would be very good. Well, thank you all for your time and trouble. Thanks, Frank, in particular, and look forward to seeing people next week. Have a good afternoon. Bye-bye.
Okay,
Bye.
thanks.